Now we're going to talk to a man who's been through it. This is a man with 13 years of experience in the Army and the Marines. He's also a combat veteran. His name is Dan McKnight, and he's the chairman of Bring Our Troops Home. What a great idea. I love it when the title tells you exactly what the organization is about. Okay, so Dan, you're here to talk with us, and we want to know first and foremost about the organization and what's behind it. Would you tell us?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. The organization, we're in our sixth year. We started in 2019 when we had a president who was talking about not starting new wars, and a bunch of combat veterans from the global war on terror. We got together and decided to go to DC and plead our case to our congressmen and senators, asking them to use this opportunity with a commander in chief that wasn't talking about new wars to maybe even bring troops home. And every single senator and congressman we met with politely took a picture with us and told us that they support the troops. They even pointed to the yellow ribbon on their door. And then they turned right around and walked us out the door and continued to support everything of the modern military industrial complex wanted. And so we decided to take our organization and leave DC. And we left with two goals. One, we wanted to go back to Wyoming and defeat Liz Cheney because she had told us that we would never leave Afghanistan as long as she was in power. And we accomplished that. And then we wanted to find a way for the states to regain their authority over matters of war. The National Guard has become the easy button for our foreign policy. And at the end of the Syrian war last December, I guess not really the technical end, but the fall of the Assad regime, 58% of the boots on the ground in Syria were from the National Guard. And so we found this bill is called Defend the Guard. It's very simple legislation, and it's done at the state level through the state legislatures, giving the governor the authority to withhold the National Guard from being called into federal service unless it's for one of the clearly identified purposes in the Constitution or in federal law. And if they want the National Guard to be activated to go fight in a war or to serve as an instrumentality of war, then Congress has to do their job first and declare war, which they haven't done since 1942. And we now have the bill in over 30 states. We're about to put it on the governor's desk in Arizona, hopefully this week. It's about ready to go before a full floor vote in Texas, maybe this week or next. But we are running into opposition. There is heavy opposition from the National Guard Bureau and the military industrial complex lobbyists. But we are pushing forward anyway. Combat veterans who've been there, who have seen the human cost of war, are the ones standing up and saying enough is enough.
Well, I think that's brilliant. And I'm sure most of the audience listening to you will agree with that. Now, I have to stop for a second and say something I would normally never say, which is that you got to give Liz Cheney credit for one thing. She was honest for a
She's
change.
honest, 100%. She was the only one that
Told you the truth. Yeah, what she was going to do. The rest are very much like her, let's face it, but they don't tell the truth. Right now, people are wondering what's going to happen with regard to Iran. And one of the points that many analysts, I'm by no means the only one, have tried to put across is this is the potential for a war that could drag on for a long time. And it would inevitably result in some sort of pressure to invade the country.
Yep.
We should have learned by now, and I think we've had a recent lesson with the bombing of the Houthis, that you're not going to get very far unless you're willing to go in on the ground and root out the enemy. Now, I'm not somebody who thinks that's what we should consider doing anywhere in the Middle East. I think we did a lot of that, and it didn't work out very well for reasons that have nothing to do with soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines, and everything to do with the people at the top who can't define an attainable objective and make it real. But tell us something. You're talking to lots of people. What sort of feedback do you get about Iran, especially from the National Guard? Because it's impossible right now, given the small numbers of soldiers in the regular army, for the army to undertake anything of significance without the Guard.
No, absolutely. And, in the height of the global war on terror, when we were fighting in multiple countries, the National Guard made up about 50% of the boots on the ground in that global war. And in order for us to invade Iran, we would need a massive ground force. I think you know this as a former armor commander. You know that there has to be a ground invasion. Iran is a geographical oddity. You can't just fight from the coast. You can't fight from the air. You'd have to have a massive ground invasion. And there was an interesting article put out by a colonel, and I can't remember his name, from the Marine Corps about a week and a half ago, talking about how the Marines are no longer equipped to be that expeditionary amphibious warfare group because they've been doing these static wars and fighting and clearing streets in Ramadi and Iraq and Afghanistan. They're no longer equipped to overtake a country from the sea and provide that ground security for the United States military to come in and clean up the end of a war. And so if our expeditionary amphibious forces, the Marine Corps, are elite, aren't able to do that, what makes anybody think that we would be able to go into Iran and take over a massive country and do it without the use of the state and militia, the National Guard, because the active duty military is so overspent. They're so depleted. They're so spread out. I think there's 50-ish, maybe 60,000 troops within striking distance of Iran in the Middle East right now on anywhere from 20 to 40 bases, depending on whose numbers you look at. And what's funny is on those bases, they're permanently stocked and staffed by National Guard troops on rotation. And so the National Guard has become this easy button. And you've been one of the clearest voices, Colonel, talking about how U.S. foreign policy is often hijacked by special interests, particularly the influence of foreign lobbies and the military-industrial complex. I agree with your assessment. And that's one of the reasons that we're pushing this Defend the Guard legislation. This law would not ban the deployments or tie the president's hands in any way. It would simply say that the National Guard troops can't be sent into combat without a declaration of war from Congress. And you know this, I know this, and I think most of America know this. Congress does not have the stones or the backbone to do what's right and what their most solemn duty is, to take control in matters of war. They're cowards, and they'll never do it without being forced. And the only way we can force it from the state level, from the combat veteran level, is to pass state-based legislation like this.
Well, just so everyone listening knows, you're talking about Colonel Gary Anderson. I know him. He's a very solid Marine, and all the comments and observations he makes are valid. Unfortunately, there's nobody looking carefully at the Marines and the Army as the ground force and looking at ways they should be organized, equipped, and trained to fight. It's a huge problem. And I think part of it is because of what you described earlier. We've had 20 plus years of interaction with opponents who, frankly, let's face it, are not very capable, not very formidable, but they can do a lot of damage to you if you're dumb enough to occupy and present a target array to them, which is what we did and never needed to do. So one of the lessons, I think, of history is that if you don't have to occupy a place, by all means, don't do it. And that also ties up whomever we've got. Now, the first major commitment of the National Guard after National Guard legislation was passed under President Wilson was to deploy 100,000 guardsmen on the border with Mexico. Very few people know that. And they sent 25, 30,000 troops from the regular army into Mexico in a punitive expedition to try and drive the criminality and the revolutionary conflict that was raging in Mexico from the border further to the south. And that was, I think, on the whole, successful. But that was the first time the Guard was used, and the argument was the National Guard exists to defend the United States. It does. It doesn't invade other people's countries.
Yep. Yeah, the Constitution says that the National Guard could be called into federal service to put down an insurrection, to repel an invasion, or to enforce the laws of the Union. That's it. It's pretty clear. And nowhere in there does it say to staff a forward operating base in Djibouti, Africa. Nowhere does it say that the National Guard should be the air bridge providing all the fuel for the C-130s and the other cargo aircraft flying over the Atlantic as an instrumentality of war. If they want the National Guard to fill that role, then we either need to amend the federal code, Title 10, and add that as one of the authorized purposes, or we need to follow what the founders of the Constitution said, and that the Congress should be giving the informed consent of the people of America before we head off headlong into these wars of choice.
Absolutely. And I think the truth is, if the American people were asked right now or had been asked in the past, they wouldn't have gone anywhere. And I don't think we would have had anybody interested in staying in Iraq for more than about 6 months. And frankly, if we had left in 6 months, no one would have cared. We'd have been out, and we would have declared that a success story. Well, right now, we're looking at this Iranian issue, and I don't see any evidence that anybody in Congress is going to ask their constituents really what they think.
No.
And that's sad. It's tragic. And there will be no request for a debate. Usually, at least historically in the United States, before we did something, there was a debate in the Senate and the House. We don't expect to see any debate at this point.
No, absolutely not. I think the last time we even considered a declaration of war would have been for Iraq, and Congressman Ron Paul brought the declaration of war to the Congress himself and said, I will present this because this is the right way. I will vote against it, but we're going to do this the right way. And they laughed him out of the room, And then when Obama went in 2014 and asked for authorization for the war in Syria, Congress told him, no, we're not going to give you that authorization. We're war weary from Iraq and from the expansion of that war. And what did Obama do? He went anyway. And so we've made a mockery of the war powers, which the founding fathers spent more time deliberating the war powers than any other part of the Constitution. It's not meant to be a throwaway. And we've been in meetings with National Guard generals, 2- and 3-star generals in their dress uniforms, sitting across the table from us, telling us, you're right, Dan, defend the Guard is constitutional, but we just don't do it that way anymore. And they're just okay with it. And so, Colonel, we've got a problem in this country. It's going to take the citizens. It's going to take us to rise up and demand that we do it the right way. We can't do it in D.C. That's not favorable ground. I think we have to do it at the states in order to protect us from fighting in Iran or Yemen or the Horn of Africa or, heaven forbid, Gaza and Israel. If we want to keep America out of those wars, the citizens have to regain our rights, our authority over our Congress.
But you've also sort of hit on something that I think is important for people to understand. Someone who becomes a general in the National Guard does not get there by accident. They get there because they're politically useful.
That's right.
They are friends with the governor, probably friends with the senators. They're not going to allow someone to come to a position of influence in the Guard who's going to raise the questions you have. So that's part of the problem. I hear people talk all the time about problems with generals in the Army and admirals and so forth. They tend to forget the Guard. And I would say that both elements now are almost equally politicized.
Sure. And you don't become a general in the National Guard without you have to pass the FedRec board. So your governor may appoint you to be the adjutant general and give you that 1st or 2nd star, but you don't get federally recognized unless the Department of Defense signs off and christens you as one of theirs. And it just shows you that the general class of the military, it is a cloning structure. Find somebody that thinks like you, acts like you, and will kiss the right rear ends like you, and drag them up through the ranks with you. And that's how you get that next star, is by promoting the 1 star below you. And it's just it's a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah. Well, it's an ice cream cone I don't want to order up.
No, thank you.
And I know you don't, and I don't think the American people want it.
Right.
Dan, thanks so much for talking to us. We deeply appreciate it, and I wish you all the best. Great seeing you this morning. Keep up the fight, no matter how hopeless it may seem.
It's never hopeless. It's just difficult.
Never. Thanks, Dan.
You bet. Thank you.